Royal Highness, Excellencies, dear friends of humanity and planet Earth. I share the optimism, we both share the optimism of Gunhild, and this platform is unique in terms of solving the major challenges in the world. But I think it's fair in a State of the Union address to start with the facts. The evidence on the social dynamics, on the geopolitical dynamics, and on the ecological dynamics leads to the conclusion that we are in a mess. And we are running against time. We have the Sustainable Development Goals in just 13 years, which is a transformation back to prosperity within a safe operating space. We are facing the Paris Climate Agreement, which is a dramatic, even a revolution to a decarbonized world future. So it is good to kind of start with the consolation that we have been very successful over the past 50 years. We have prolonged longevity to 71 years on average. We have done major accomplishments in terms of getting down child mortality to under 10%, 5%. We have a wealth trajectory which is phenomenal, of course, over the past 50 years, where we are actually at a trajectory where we can eradicate absolute poverty, despite the fact that we are 7.5 billion co-citizens on Earth. But we have to recognize that this has come at a price. And this price has scientifically been, in a State of the Union format, concluded as the Great Acceleration, the exponential rise in pressures from population growth, GDP growth, and exploitation of resources on Earth. This has delivered phenomenally to the world citizenship across the entire planet, but we know that it has only worked thanks to the stability, the resilience, and the forgiveness of the Earth system. So here you see the latest synthesis data on the equal exponential rise in pressures on all the systems that uphold livelihoods, prosperity for humanity, and the stability of the Earth system. The great acceleration of the pressures from carbon dioxide release all the way to the 6th mass extinction that we're entering on biodiversity loss. It is thanks to the resilience of the system that we've been able to have this subsidy from the planet to maintain our ability to develop. But we've now come to a saturation point. This era is ended. Now we need a transformation to take us away from this risk. But the risk is not only biophysical, it is certainly also geopolitical.
I'm going to add a few little notes about what's been happening, what's new in the world of health and environment over the past year. And obviously, probably the biggest threat has been the United States election. And I quote from Jeffrey Sachs, who was here on the stage last year, Trump is an old, sleazy, lazy, ignorant man. But this is about billionaires and narrow financial interest. And his point was that we can target Trump and be terrified even by things that he says, but this is not just one person. It is part of the system in the United States, and a large part of the Republican senators do support what he's been saying. However, it's really important, as Dr. Sachs pointed out, that the majority of Americans would like to stay in the Paris Agreement. Cities, states, businesses have declared that they will support and comply with the Paris Agreement. So this is what you see going on from the White House is still a minority view in America.
And we hope that we'll get a Trump effect in the world, revitalizing even more the transition to a decarbonized future. So the key message of a State of the Union from science today is the following, and it has a deep kind of hits you really deep in terms of the conviction and commitment to a transition to a sustainable future, that we have the empirical evidence today that it is over the last 50 years that we've moved so decisively in the wrong direction in terms of pressures on the Earth system that we are destabilizing the position of the Earth system over the past 10,000 years. So we're pushing ourselves out of the Holocene, the stable state that has enabled us to develop food systems and the modern economy as we know it. But that's not enough. We have evidence suggesting very strongly that what we do over the coming 50 years will actually determine the outcome for humanity over the next 10,000 years. And most of us, at least the elder parts like myself, we were here most of the last 50 years, and we will hopefully be here most of the next 50 years. So this is a tipping point that we are in right now. This is the decisive tipping point. It's in our hands to now learn from the past failures and transition to the future solutions. And that is at the heart of the food agenda that we are addressing here. And much of the science shows something completely new, that we need a new relationship with planet Earth. We need to reconnect to the biosphere. We need to become planetary stewards, actually even taking a new moral and ethical stance that every child's birthright is a stable and resilient planet. That this is a new definition of the global commons. And we've been working with the Global Environment Facility, and Naoko Ishii is here with us, to recognize the fact that we now need to be stewards of every biome, every system that supports humanity and food across the world. And the reason for this is that the Earth system is not reacting, as we know, in incremental and linear ways. No, we put pressure. The Earth system is resilient, has been absorbing for 50, 100 years, but now is the point where we have so much evidence of the tipping point that we can trigger already at 2.5, 3 degrees Celsius that could actually take us to a disastrous future. And this is not only climate-driven, and it's not only ice sheets, it is the rainforests, the monsoon rain systems, the savanna systems, the fundamental fabric that produces food. But even further than that, in ongoing research, unpublished so far, so please do not tweet this everywhere across the world, we're starting to see the evidence of the interconnectivity between these systems. The yellow systems here are the ones that are at risk, scientifically, already below 3 degrees Celsius warming, like the Greenland ice sheet, like the Arctic summer sea ice, like the tipping points in alpine glaciers. But they, if they would be allowed to tip, could have domino effects hitting the red ones, the ones that we, as so far as we know today, would not tip over until we are at 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. And they, in turn, could have domino effects all the way hitting the East Antarctic ice sheet or the permafrost methane stocks that would in itself push the Earth system away, far away, from anything manageable in terms of food and prosperity for humanity. So it's really time to take the state of the union or the state of the planet seriously in terms of the risks we're taking. So it was not a coincidence that Earth system science defined the planetary boundaries, which gives us quantitatively the best effort of defining a safe operating space for humanity, and that a new definition of sustainable food for healthy prosperity for humanity is to attain health and prosperity within the planetary boundaries of the Earth system that can keep us in a manageable interglacial state. This has led to an enormous gathering of science, from the IPCC to the Global Energy Assessment to the IPBS, and we have Sir Bob Watson here chairing the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, on exploring what are the transformative pathways we need to now pursue to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals in 13 years. But that will not be enough. That's just a milestone on a transformation to a sustainable prosperity for humanity on a stable and resilient Earth system, meaning world prosperity within safe operating space of planetary boundaries by 2050. And that this is a transformational journey of innovation, of disruption, of diversity, both in social and biophysical terms, which is at the heart of this EAT Forum 2017, looking at innovation and transformation to achieve this enormously attractive goal. We have recently tried to translate this in a paper that I think has some really profound support to our agenda this year, which is a paper translating what it would take to deliver Paris into a global carbon law. We know, as we all know, that if you translate the scenarios of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change to be able to deliver the planetary limit of 2 degrees Celsius, aiming for 1.5 degrees Celsius, that we have quite a good grasp of what is the mitigation pathways we need to follow. We need to bend the global curve of emissions of fossil fuels no later than 2020. So Christiana Figueres, the former head of the UN FCCC, has absolutely right in her Mission 2020. So you see that in this curve. And then we need to basically reach a fossil fuel-free world economy by mid-century in order to be able to deliver on Paris. But that will not be enough. You also need to transition, and you see that in the brown line here, world food systems from being today the single largest emitter of greenhouse gases to transition into becoming the single largest sink of carbon by mid-century. This is an agrarian revolution. It is to become a sink of in the order of up to 10 gigatons of carbon dioxide per year, and that will not be enough in itself, but it's a necessity to deliver on Paris. The next necessity is actually to recognize that we also need to invest in different forms of carbon capture and storage, and not least biomass carbon capture and storage, which of course has implications on land, water, biodiversity, and needs to be incorporated in our planning for the future. And not even that will be enough, because we also need to maintain the ecosystem carbon sinks in oceans and natural ecosystems. So biodiversity plays a fundamental role to stand a chance for Paris. And even if we do all of this, decarbonize the world economy, transition agriculture to a sink, build different forms of carbon capture and storage, and maintain ecosystem resilience, we only have a 66% chance of delivering Paris. There's no coincidence that science is nervous. And there's no coincidence that we need to really think about innovation and transformation. The curve we're following here translates to a Moore's law type innovation pathway, and we've baptized this to the global carbon law. It actually translates very directly to the law of halving emissions every decade. If we can bend the curve at 40 gigatons, we would then halve it to 20 by 2030, to 10 by 2040, to 5 by 2050, and that would take us to Paris. We produced this and launched this as an innovation pathway to be inspired by the Moore's law of innovation in the ICT industry. We hope that this could be an inspiration also for the EAT Forum, and not least showing in the empirical evidence that if you look at the past, this is a graph showing the energy mix in the world and the pace by which renewable energy is being now adopted across the world. So you see up to 2015 our energy mix in the world with coal, oil, gas, nuclear, and hydro. The little sliver in the bottom there is renewable energy, which is only 2.8% today. But the pace of doubling is exponential and has been for 15 years, doubling every 5.4 years. If we just let that business as usual curve continue, is the orange first curve means that by 2045, we would actually be in a 100% fossil fuel-free economy. Just business as usual. This just shows the power of exponential transformation and can be an inspiration for us. So the EAT Forum this year will focus very much on innovation, transformation, connecting the different SDGs, all of them, as we did last year in the wedding cake of fundamentally recognizing that they're all a comprehensive whole, but also in particularly focusing on climate, biodiversity, fresh water, and the challenge of alleviating hunger and livelihoods for humanity. So it's no coincidence that we have the new food economy, which will be taking off as a dialogue here. We have the Fresh platform of business solutions for the future on healthy, sustainable food systems with the World Business Council. We have tremendous initiatives with the C40 network of cities in the world, and we have the Lancet Commission, as Gunnar pointed out. And all of this to be able to solve the challenge of us having transformed 40% of land, and that we need to increase food production with an extraordinary level of up to 70% of calories in the future, which has tremendous health implications.
Just a few more words about the food and nutrition side of the picture here. This is a slide I've shown in this context before. I'm sure many of you have seen something like it many times before, but basically the point that if we look at various food sources and greenhouse gas emissions, far and away red meat and then dairy are the major contributors, whether you look at this as per calorie produced or per gram of protein produced. There's been, just in terms of what's happened in the last 12 months, one important paper that came out just a few weeks ago looked at the health side of consuming high amounts of red meat in the diet. This is a study from about 500,000 people conducted in the United States. This group of men and women were followed for 16 years. And on the left part of it, you can see those are hazard ratios or relative risks. All the blue dots to the right of the vertical blue line mean increase in risk. And as you can see, for looking at all causes of death, cancer, heart disease, respiratory disease, high red meat consumption contributes to all of those health hazards. So basically, high consumption of red meat is making the planet sick, but also making people sick as well. And that's an important theme that cuts through the Lancet Commission report that we're working on. This finding actually wasn't totally new. It confirmed a paper we had published a couple of years ago. And here we're looking at the dose-response relationship between red meat consumption and total mortality in a population that we have, a couple 100,000 people, men and women. On the top, that's men, and on the bottom, it's women. The important point here is that this is basically a linear relationship. There's no sharp cutoff, and in general, it shows the lower the red meat consumption, the lower is the risk of dying prematurely. We've also looked at diet composition in another way during the past few months. This is a paper led by Ambika Satija. And what we've done is create a plant-based diet score. Now, we all know that plant foods in general are said to be healthy, but donuts and Coca-Cola are plant foods too. So we do have to subdivide the plant foods into healthy plant foods and unhealthy plant foods, the healthy ones being nuts, legumes, fruits, vegetables, of course. So we created a very simple score. Just you get 1 point for a plant food and a negative point for an animal food. And the higher you are on this score, this is looking at type 2 diabetes risk. We see the same thing for cardiovascular mortality. The higher you are, the lower is your risk of these diseases. Again, just reinforcing the health benefits of a more plant-based eating program. But again, there's no sharp cutoff, and I think that's an important point. It's not that tomorrow everybody's going to go out and be a vegan. In fact, not everybody has to be a vegan, but moving as far along as possible down this path will get you better and better health as we go along. I also, a couple of years ago, gave a report on diet trends in the United States. If we step back, look overall what's changing, the good news is that we are changing in general in a better direction, and change is possible. Rapid change is possible. These are the 11 variables that go into our alternative healthy eating index. The most profound change is the top line there, trans fat. And of course, that's mainly to do with what we do to food after it's produced, the processing. But we've eliminated almost 85% of trans fat in the United States since year 2000. Really rapid, profound change. And that's already showing up as reduction in diabetes incidence and reduction in heart disease incidence. And the other big change right in the middle, that yellow line going up, means the score is going up because of a reduction, about a 25% reduction in soda consumption, which again is already having benefits in terms of diabetes reduction in the United States. Red meat consumption is going down slowly. It's gone down about 10%. We'd like to see that go down faster, but apart from that, most of the changes are in the right direction. So overall, our diet quality is improving. I show this in part to make the point that change, quite rapid change in our food supply is possible, and it's already having health benefits.
And this is why it's important to recognize where science is advancing. I mean, we know, we have the facts today that our diets are responsible for 80% of deforestation, 25% of greenhouse gases, majority of biodiversity loss. But we also have, just since the last year, a massive production of really, really high-level science. And many of the scientists are here, Marco Springman, Michael Clark, David Tillman, showing the evidence that good, healthy diets can actually reduce global mortality significantly by 6–10%, reduce greenhouse gases by up to 30 to 70%, halt deforestation, and actually reduce biodiversity loss. And at the same time, earn us money. That we have win-win solutions and the first series of science now showing the future transformations. We have business dialogues between science and business now taking off, and Her Royal Highness was hosting one of the key efforts, the Keystone Dialogues, with the top CEOs of the largest seafood industries, really recognizing the need to now incorporate sustainability in their business models. And this is happening as we speak. We've bent the curves on many, many key areas. We've reached peak child. We have stabilized the stratospheric ozone layer based on science evidence and the Montreal Protocol and action from policy and business. And we are bending the curve of global emissions. We're actually on our way to succeed in the decarbonization in the future. So we're seeing planetary intelligence taking off. And that needs us to reconnect finally to our base.
Part of the challenge we face, I think, is shown in this figure using FAO data. This is for the United States. We've done this for a number of countries. But like in many areas, We are the worst offenders in the United States. This is how we use the domestic production of grain in the United States. First of all, 30%, the light blue area, is converted to ethanol for driving big cars. 43% is used to feed to animals, to produce beef, primarily some dairy production. There, 13% is for manufacturing. That means like making high fructose corn syrup. And only 10% is actually eaten by humans. So we could actually get rid of a lot of the land use in the United States, and people would be healthier. And of course, the planet would be healthier as well. That land use could go fallow, actually, and we would all be much better off. To bring those sort of national statistics down to what's going on the ground, I thought it would be useful to show, this is actually from our family farm. A barn built in 1883, and that's our grandchild there. We visited last summer. And as I was growing up as a child and visiting my grandfather, this was an incredibly biodiverse kind of production. You might say it wasn't as efficient in terms of production per land area, but it had worked for generations. But what happened is shown in this picture. It's a totally different view of the farm than I saw growing up. This is essentially monoculture corn, and this is not our farm. It's the next farm and the next farm and the next farm, all rolled into one vast field almost as far as you can see. Obviously, biodiversity gone 100%. And this is making us sick, both from what it's producing in terms of corn. We're essentially not using that to promote human health, and obviously it's making the planet sick at the same time. So it's, I think, a vision of what is the challenge that's facing us. There was one new crop that had been sprouting up across the countryside that was actually encouraging, though, and that's windmills. It's, in fact, on the ground what Johan was talking about. And so there are signs here on the ground of huge challenges, but also some definitely elements of change and optimism.
So to conclude, the State of the Union is, in fact, scientifically that we are in a dire situation. We're facing tremendous challenges, but a disruptive transformation based on innovation pathways where healthy and sustainable food forms part of a pathway that can take us to prosperity within the safe operating space of a sustainable Earth system. Thank you very much.